Good morning, everyone. Happy Wednesday, I believe. Everybody looks wonderful. For those of you who don't know me, Io Harrington, I'm the co-chair of New York City VOAD. My co-chair, Zach, is off on vacation. He decidedly deserves with his family. We're going to give it about 1 more minute, and then we are going to begin. So again, good morning, everyone. Hope everybody's feeling okay today. It's beautiful weather out there, so hope everybody gets an opportunity to enjoy some of it. Today, for our meeting, we're going to be talking about a really important subject. We're going to talk about how many individuals and organizations are welcoming asylum seekers to New York City. The official report is that over 50,000 asylum seekers have moved through the city's intake system since last spring. Currently, New York City says that they are sheltering, or that about 30,000 people have come through their intake system, and that's more than any other city in the nation. Some were given tickets to elsewhere. Some went directly to family or to friends. Some may have fallen through the cracks, but many and most have been welcomed by some of our amazing nonprofit organizations in New York City, many of whom are members of New York City VOAD at the ready, and also individuals who have just on their own gone on to assist and still are assisting asylum seekers and doing amazing work. They come from all over, from Haiti, Northern Central America, Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador. The list goes on. They have come from Cuba, Nicaragua, Brazil, India, and African countries, Ghana, Ethiopia, and Cameroon. Today, we are going to hear from some of the organizations that are providing assistance to asylum seekers. They're going to talk about the ones that we hear about every day on the news, and they are going to talk about the ones that nobody hears about and for whom resources are limited or not at all. So first, we are going to hear from Beatriz Diaz Taveras. She heads Catholic Charities Community Services department, and we don't really have to explain much about Catholic Charities. They have been around since, I think, the early 1900s, 1910, I believe, and they provide a multitude of services. So if there's someone in need, one of the first organizations that anyone is going to direct people to, it's going to be Catholic Charities. So without further ado, we are going to hear from this amazing woman to talk about the scope of work that they provide. They have been providing for asylum seekers. So welcome, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for such a gracious introduction. But we're just one of many agencies providing services to this community. And it takes a village, and it really does take a village. So good morning once again to all. I'm Beatriz Diaz Taveras, the Executive Director for Catholic Charities Community Services. Since the late 70s, Catholic Charities has been at the forefront of responding to the humanitarian crisis, and more so evidence to the recent response of the arrivals of asylum seekers to New York City. Beginning in last April, so more than a year ago in early May, our case management staff started to see a noticeable number of asylum seekers at our office locations in the South Bronx and here at our 1011 First Avenue office, which is an administrative office. And these numbers steadily increased throughout the spring with a drastic increase during the summer. We were surprised by this and we were wondering what's happening. After some digging and really speaking with our national partners, what we discovered is that there was one area where the Border Patrol was actually using the office addresses of many nonprofits throughout the United States and sending the asylum seekers to those offices, telling them that they're going to receive you and this will be your residence. Little did the asylum seekers realize they were coming to office buildings where we were not prepared to handle them. So with working with our national partners, we were able to make sure that the Border Patrol crossing did not use our office addresses for that. But this was happening in the summer. And as these numbers continue to increase, we mobilized an immediate response, really combining both our case management and our legal services to meet the immediate basic need of these individuals. Namely, they needed non-perishable emergency food, basic need supplies, hygiene supplies, diapers, clothing. We were also able to provide them with cash assistance, gift cards, and legal screening just to assess their status and the immediate immigration court expectations. Excuse me a second. I have a frog in my throat.
No worries.
At our administrative offices here at 1011, we served over 2,000 people in that summer. At that time, most of the asylum seekers that we were seeing were from Venezuela, with a smaller number from Colombia and a minimal percentage from countries like Honduras, Peru, Haiti, and Cuba. Again, during that same time, our senior leadership, along with other community-based organizations, advocated with the New York City administration for a centralized resource and service location for the asylum seekers to be directed upon arrival in New York City. Through a competitive bid, our agency was awarded the contract to be the site operator and case management service provider of the newly formed Asylum Seekers Resource Navigation Center, which is located at the American Red Cross building on West 49th Street in Manhattan. The Navigation Center, probably many of us will realize this was a disaster case model. We decided to take one of those resource centers and just see if we could make it work for the asylum seeker population. So we were just taking a page out of our book again and applying it. It was designed to be, as any other disaster case management model, a one-stop shop where the asylum seekers could receive multiple city-sponsored benefits in one location. So we were able to have DOE there, the Department of Education, to enroll their children in school. We also had IDNYC to start them on the city benefits for their ID. Fair Fares was also there. We also had the administration of children's services, not the enforcement need, but really to advocate for children's services and their needs. We are able to provide mental health intervention and medical health through both DOHMH and Doc2Go, and also health in hospitals. In addition, we also have Metro Plus on staff in the building to help households enrolled with health insurance. And again, our agency and other agencies offered Know Your Right presentations and legal triage, assisting those with upcoming court hearings. Also, we provided change of address and change of court venue if needed. Households who come to us are provided with a 2-trip Metro card and meal tickets for each household member. The meals are really just bagged lunches, which are distributed through an affiliated agency of ours, of Catholic Charities, a dwelling place, which is just a few blocks for the Navigation Center. To date, at the Navigation Center, we have served over 5,000 unduplicated households, and over 10,000 individuals have received some form of service at the Navigation Center. Most of the households are from Venezuela, over 69%, but we are seeing an increasing number of other nationalities come through the center: Colombia, Ecuador, Nicaragua, and we're also seeing, as our introduction said, many, many more other countries, including Russians coming. So it's been a challenge to meet the language requirements, but we are making all efforts to meet with them. The majority of those coming to the Navigation Center are housed in the New York City shelter system. But an essential part of serving the asylum seekers is the provision of services across the 5 boroughs. So in addition, we have partnered with 10 community-based agencies to build on the ongoing work of the Navigation Centers. These agencies provide comprehensive case management, immigrant rights workshop, workforce development trainings, emergency food, clothing, health, wellness workshops, and other needed services in the community. So we are partnering with AIDS for AIDS International, African Communities Together, Catholic Charities Neighborhood Services of Brooklyn and Queens, Coalición Mexicana, La Colmena, Catholic Charities of Staten Island, Make the Road New York City, Mercy Center, Mixteca Organization, and New Immigrants Community Empowerment, NICE. Collectively, all of these agencies are providing services in their respective neighborhoods to approximately over 3,000 individuals monthly. Again, this is a very needed service. And as all of us know, we're also trying to dispel the myth of why they're coming here. They're coming to work and they're looking for employment, and many of them are finding employment and are making their way through in this city. So that is always one of our messages when we're in the public arena, and letting also all our elected officials know this is a community that wants to work and is looking for all those opportunities as much as possible. They're the same as any other wave of immigrants who have come to New York City or who've come to the United States, really looking to better their lives. And we have heard so many stories. I just want to share one story of a young man during the summer who had come to us, and he was in shorts and a t-shirt. And when the case manager asked him, so how else can we help you? He looked at her and said, well, you have to get me better clothing. No one's going to hire me in shorts and a t-shirt. I need a regular shirt and jeans. Can you help me with that? Our case manager was taken aback, but she realized that was the need that was there. And again, we tried to meet that need. As I mentioned, it was not just case management services that our agency provided, but we also do immigration legal services. And this, we did it through our Know Your Rights presentation, helping them understand what are their rights in New York City, in the United States, and how they have to continue their passageway or their immigration court cases. We also helped the asylum seekers with what we call change of venue, so that their court case can be transferred to New York, and also letting the immigration courts know where their address are, so with a change of court address. And we are helping them and providing legal assistance. But I do have to say, the community, there is not enough. Our nonprofit world in the immigration legal services is at its max, and we are trying to serve them, but we really are tapped out as a unit throughout all of them. So again, this this situation really clearly highlights the work of our staff and everyone who was involved, not only our staff, but all the other agencies, and really our message of just carrying out our mission of providing help and creating hope. I thank you for this presentation and for inviting me.
Okay, I was on mute. Thank you so much for that information. I'm sure it's going to be very helpful to the general public, but our organizations that are working with the asylum seeker immigrant community, because really it's they're different words, but they're kind of the same in terms of the need that they have. Um, and Beatrice, if you can stay with us for a while longer, I think we're going to listen to the other speakers before we take questions. Um, so the next person that I want to introduce is interesting. This young man hails from the Lower East Side. So shout out to the Lower East Side, which is also where I happen to live. Power Malu is a Nuyorican born and raised on the Lower East Side. In 2018, he founded Arts, Athletes, and Activists, and that is how he wants to be known for the work that he contributes in each of those areas. It's a nonprofit organization that takes action to support vulnerable communities by connecting them to critical services. His organization was instrumental during Hurricane Maria, which I certainly remember, efforts to provide relief in Puerto Rico. And then he also launched a plant-based community fridge initiative here in the Lower East Side. I think there are now 9 in the area and some in some of our neighborhood schools as well. And if you've been through Port Authority in the area in which the asylum seekers are, gather, you will see him there on the ground doing work or moving about New York City, wherever his assistance is needed. So we are going to hear from Power now. Is Power with us, actually?
Yes, I am.
Excellent. So
Why are you?
good morning and thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you. Just want to be clear that Artists, Athletes, Activists is an emergency response team currently on the ground in New York City, receiving the migrants that have been coming in from Texas and other parts of the United States at New York Port Authority and other ports of entry. We are responding to the emergency as best as we could with minimal resources. People ask us, the migrants still coming to Port Authority? We get about 250 to 300 people coming to Port Authority on a daily basis for an array of reasons. All in all, we must remind ourselves that whether we start getting another influx of migrants, asylees from the border, we should be clear that the emergency is not only when the migrants arrive, because there's always hype around that, and there's news cameras and people step up and they help initially, but then many stop helping. And the crisis is not when we welcome the migrants. The emergency, the crisis is when the migrants are here with no direction and not enough support, and the desperation and depression starts setting in. So we are a mobile help desk. We're doing mobile case management to support the families. We do follow-ups about immigration process. We have them sit with lawyers to go over their case. Our volunteers assist them with their change of address, change of venue. We do about 2,500 change of address, change of venue per month. This is extremely important because there continue to be individuals and family members that come to us with their court date hearings around the corner, like literally within the next few days or even the next day. And we have to scramble to try to support them. We have to get people round trip tickets. Our organization gets them to and from their court dates, whether it's nearby in New Jersey or as far as Miami or California. If we're lucky, we can get support from some of our NGO partners in the other states to help house them for a day, and then to actually help them get back here to New York after they attend their court hearing. We've had to connect migrants with partners in other states when they found themselves stranded after being told they would have steady work in that other state, or were exploited for work, or simply lied to and told that they had a place to stay, but it turned out to be only for a few days, if that. We've had to pay for Lyfts and Ubers for families to get from airports safely to shelter. We paid to transport migrants, especially families with babies that are arriving to the Hercs and that are filled to capacity, and to DHS shelters that either have no beds or require a different family composition makeup, and they're in the wrong place. Rather than send them on the train, we are getting them into Ubers and getting them to safely to their destination. Sometimes the family composition changes and a family member arrives to one of the shelters and there's no space for them. So they need to go to PATH, and the supervisors at that shelter will call us and say, hey, we have a family here. They want to remain together. We don't have space for them. And then we actually send a Uber or a Lyft for them to get to PATH, to be able to be included, to be able to do the add-on. For shelter, social work, people come to us for healthcare. They come to the Port Authority for an array of reasons. They come to talk, to have somebody that can listen to them. Mental health is a big thing. They ask us to help with issues that they're having at their current shelter, and they feel like they're being ignored or not being heard by shelter staff, or the particular shelter may not have a social worker to assist them. So we help them with whatever issues they are having. We set up events in various community centers and sites where we give out basic essentials, food, toiletries, information, we answer questions, we do workshops for them, know your rights workshops. We provide them with an all-around assurance that we are here for them if they need support. Our numbers are like probably blasted on billboards and all types of chats. We're the ones that they call. You're gonna hear from my partner today. And we basically are a one-stop shop mobile help desk supporting pregnant moms that are here alone. Many of them crossed with their husbands, but their husbands were kept in detention and are still in detention. Many of these moms are about to give birth. In fact, one of the moms gave birth 2 days ago and her husband is still in detention, and we've been fighting to get him released. They only released her first because she was obviously pregnant, but there's really no rhyme or reason to be keeping the husband detained. So we fight, we call ICE, we try to get them to have some type of empathy. We get the families to actually communicate with each other for the first time in months sometimes, because we do our research and we find where the detention center is and where the person is located. Our volunteers go with the woman to their doctor's appointments. So luckily, sometimes when they are here, they're alone if they don't have family or friends, and our volunteers become that for them and they support them going to their appointments. Our volunteers support with childcare. Recently, our volunteers had to assist families in obtaining birth certificates for their newborns. They help sign up the kids to school to enroll them. We connect them with phones so they can speak to family members in detention centers and back home. We buy Metro cards for migrants to help them get to their appointments, and family members that want to accompany their children to school, something as simple as that. Getting around the city to sightsee as a mental health therapeutic stress reliever. Migrants have traveled together to these long journeys with family members. Some are separated at the border and we work towards reuniting them when they are released. Some arrive with immigration documents while others took a different route and don't have that documentation. So things are a little bit more challenging for the latter group. However, when those immigration documents, we find many challenges because that document is a federal document that actually allows them to board a plane. But for some reason, when they get here, they still find challenges in getting something as simple as a NYC ID. For many, it's the only documentation they have. In early August, we were taking migrants to DMV thinking they'd be able to get an ID from there, but it proved to be an uphill battle. So we proposed the idea of allowing migrants to get an NYC ID, which kudos to the city for making that happen after a few months of the buses arriving to New York City. That idea is a game changer for many reasons, but one of the most important reasons is because it helps lift up the morale of the people. It gives them a sense of belonging. And it's a beautiful sight to see when they come to you showing off their NYC ID. However, there are still glitches in the process, including mixed messages by staff when the asylees arrive to apply for the NYC ID. Hence why our volunteers accompany migrants to apply for their ID. Many times we do this like a school field trip where we bring about 10 to 20 at a time, and we travel with them. If they're not able to travel with us, we ask them to meet us at the location. There are times when partners are separated and their significant other arrives, and we flag the case to have them stay together or arrive together, but have lost documentation proving that they are a couple. So we need to flag these cases. And early on, we had to accompany them to the city clerk's office to pay for their domestic partnership certificates. The amount of money we were spending on the money orders got out of hand, and we couldn't continue doing that. So we fought to explain that couples do not have the funds to get these domestic partnerships. The majority of them arrive with nothing, and we're asking them to pay to stay together. So this is an ongoing issue we're facing, and why we get so many people sleeping on the streets when they get here, sometimes for 3 days in a row, until they find us to share their story and we can flag their case. Even then, they rather sleep on the street together than get separated by the system if there's still an issue. Word travels fast, and we all know the DHS system was not meant for this population. In my humble opinion, it's a system similar to prison that can actually break the spirit of a human, which is why we try our best to support and guide not only migrants, but the locals that have been in the system for far too long and going through the struggle. We work many cases with minors that have been placed in either youth detention or youth shelter in other states or here in New York, where we support families in obtaining the proper documentation and taking all the steps that they need to have the child released to them in custody. In fact, we have another child that's about to be released in 2 days that has been up in Dobbs Ferry at the Children's Village. The family is from Angola, and it's taken about a month and a half to have documents translated from Portuguese to English. So we took it upon ourselves to get translators to do the work and contact lawyers. And so we do this kind of work. We have many families that have been reunited, and thanks to the work of our volunteers, we keep doing this work.
Thank you, Power. Thank you so much for that. I mean, I don't even know what to say other than thank you. And thank you. And thank you. I hope that you can stay with us in case we have questions. We're going to go on to our next presenter. All of us know Peter Gudaitis. He is a member of the New York City VOAD board, has been for many years. He has a whole bunch of hats. I'm sorry, I cannot mention all of them, Peter. I'm just going to say that he currently serves as executive director and CEO of the New York Disaster Interfaith Services and its affiliate, the New York City Emergency Shelter Network. He is chair of New York State VOAD and is president of the National Disaster Interfaith Network. His organization, of course, based in faith, is working with this same immigrant and asylum seeking population. So Peter, we would like to hear from you what your organization is doing and what you're seeing.
Thanks, Io. Good morning, everybody. I'm going to share a little bit about what we're starting rather than what we've been doing, because I think that's where we're trying to build some capacity. So we, sometime in the next few weeks, with funding from New York City, we're going to be opening 50 asylum seeker shelters in houses of worship across the city as a starting point. And we hope that that program will expand. My colleague, Jennifer Cannon, is on with us today. She just joined us. She'll be the managing director of the Emergency Shelter Network. So, and I can certainly get the link to IO to share with everybody, but what we're looking for is congregations that will house 19 individuals, because that's the size of a New York City stabilization bed shelter. And this program is designed on that program, on that city program. We will be housing, obviously, with 50 congregations and 19 beds. That's 950 asylees a night. We'll receive those individuals through the city's host system, which is the city's database system for tracking where asylees are staying. And we're currently vetting congregations that can serve as those shelter sites across all 5 boroughs. Of course, they need to have language and cultural competency for the population that they're sheltering, meaning Spanish speaking or West African speaking primarily staff, security and shelter staff. They'll be compensated for hosting individuals. I can't say how much because the city wants to announce that information themselves, but they'll be compensated both for utility reimbursement, space rental, food, security, overnight staff, linens, linen service, Metro cards for their guests, laundry cards for their guests so that they can take their laundry to a local neighborhood facility and launder their clothes once a week. And obviously they will continue to be supported by all the wonderful work of Catholic Charities and artists, athletes, and activists and other groups across the city. We know that the primary 2 populations that we are targeting with this program are West African asylees, which Adama, who's I believe on here with us, has been doing amazing work in partnership with the Interfaith Center, supporting those mosques that are housing West African Muslim asylees. And there are churches across the city and synagogues that have been hosting asylees through our traditional emergency shelter network because they are throughout the homeless shelter population as well, going to the New York City homeless drop-in centers and trying to find emergency beds on a nightly basis, which we provide through our emergency shelter network. But we're trying to move asylees specifically to these stabilization bed facilities that will be across the 5 boroughs. At the same time, we also have a partnership with a fashion industry charity where we're going to be providing new clothing and home goods to individuals like we have in previous disasters. For those of you in BOAD that are familiar with the Hurricane Maria marketplace that we had in Spanish Harlem for about a year after Hurricane Maria, and we did the same thing for Katrina and Haiti evacuees previously, so we're going to be doing that for asylees. We also are going to be providing grants to congregations to build shower facilities in their bathrooms or some appropriate space. We are doing that for 2 reasons. One, because you have to have showers to house asylees. But the second is we're hoping that long-term congregations that participate in this program will return to the New York City stabilization bed program to provide shelter on a more permanent basis to our street homeless that are seeking a stabilization bed shelter opportunity in congregations. And I think those of you that were involved with Sandy recovery are aware that Gudaitis was working with congregations across the city to provide housing to rebuild volunteers for about 4 years, 5 years after Sandy. So we want as many houses of worship as possible in the city to have showers, so that they can also house disaster volunteers after disasters, whether that's FEMA Corps teams or AmeriCorps teams or National VOAD volunteer teams. Anything that increases the capability of congregations in our city to be able to shelter people in times of crisis is important. And obviously serving our street homeless population with emergency beds is also an important endeavor. So we're hoping that this program will come online fully sometime in June. We've just got Jennifer on board. We hope to be operationally ready in 6 to 8 weeks, onboarding first the congregations that are already sheltering asylees and adding as we go. We have over 50 congregations that have already filled out our survey to ask all the questions that they need to answer accurately to qualify. Every site will have to be inspected by a registered design professional, so an architect, to ensure that they conform to code requirements with like sprinkler systems and these kinds of things. So yeah, I mean, that's where we're headed. We will continue to support Power and his organization with funding for the community fridges, so that there are places that individuals can go to get free vegetables and fruit during the day. Obviously not just asylees, but anybody in food desert areas of the city that needs food. And we'll continue to do many of the other, unmet needs related efforts that we already have in place.
Peter, I'm going to stop you there and thank you for the presentation because we have 2 more speakers. I know that each of you have much more to say, and I want to make sure that we have time for a question or 2. So Peter, again, thank you for joining us today and all of the days that you join us and for all of the work that you're doing. Thank you so much. We're next going to go to Adama Bah. Really excited to introduce her. She came to the United States in 1990 at the age of 2. She lived here in the States and attended public schools. Then at the age of 16, her whole world changed. The FBI raided her apartment. They handcuffed her along with her father. She was detained and told she was illegal. Her father was deported. Adama was allowed to stay, but forced to drop out of school and to support her family. Now, Adama tells her story to call attention to the plight of others like her, and has really been a shining light in the area of emergency preparedness to all kinds of people who have come to New York City. And she's here today to talk about that and about some of the unrealized, to the general public at least, populations who are in need. So Adama, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I know you briefly touched on my story, so I'll briefly go over it. So in 2005, I became the first female minor woman to be accused of terrorism after 9/11. I was only 16 years old at the time. I spent 6.5 weeks in juvenile detention center. I was released under a gag order, an ankle bracelet, and a curfew. I was then eventually granted an asylum after 2 years. From asylum, green card, and then citizenship. It took me 16 years to become an American citizen. Within those 16 years, I've been working with the undocumented community and just all types of community. Growing up, it was either you were undocumented or you were a citizen. But then when I went through my situation, I learned about the others, the in-between ones. So the asylum, the visa. So when we first heard about buses, I was reading migrants around 2014 in the buses. Migrants have always used buses. Undocumented people have always used buses to travel throughout the United States because we can go undetected. We don't have to provide documentation or ID. So migrants have been doing this for years. And then when we heard about the buses, it first started off as a rumor. And then of course, I just got on the phone and started calling people around. I'm like, did you hear about buses coming to New York? And to my knowledge, it was true. We had a meeting with the city prior to the buses happening. And I don't think they believed us. But the thing about understanding about the buses is that the NGOs in Texas are willing to work with NGOs here in New York. So when they offered to work with us, we accepted. We did not decline. There was no way of stopping the buses. It was either just working with the NGOs that are sending them. So originally we went out the mission of welcoming the migrants, feeding them, clothing them, and then moving on, sending them off to shelter and providing resources. But what we saw happen is a huge number of migrants coming back to Port Authority, asking for help. Currently at Port Authority, we get 300 plus migrants every day that come for help. But I can talk on forever about the migrants, but I really want to touch base on the forgotten migrants. And the reason why I call them forgotten migrants is because we have not catered to them. So when the first bus came, it was myself and 5 other women. We greeted the bus and all I noticed was Hispanic migrants. The second bus, the third bus, the fourth bus came and all I noticed was Hispanic migrants. And I said, where are the Black migrants? Because I'm picking them up at airports and bus terminals. How come they're not getting access to this bus? So in further discussion and investigation, we found out Black migrants, when they're caught at the border, they're then detained at another location. They're put on a plane to go to Louisiana, for example. Louisiana is a very famous detention center right now for migrants. Once they're detained at Louisiana, about 80% of Black migrants have to pay a bond to be released. If that bond is not paid, they are not released. There's an organization called ABISA that has a Black bail fund. They're the only NGO that are paying for Black migrants' bail. We work with organizations like Haitian Bridge Alliance. If you know Haitian Bridge Alliance, you know Gerline. She's a phenomenal woman, amazing. Abisa Sadie, she's a phenomenal woman. We need to know her. So Abisa is connected to other Black immigrant rights leaders around the country. And for a while, she was looking for someone in New York because all these Black migrants are being released in the streets. She's paying for their flight in New York. And then they're coming in the streets and being unhoused and sleeping in train stations and sometimes at mosques. Someone connected us together and said, you need to talk to Adama. I connected with her and we were able to help thousands of Black migrants get into the shelter system that was not made for them. The problem with this migrant crisis that happened is that we prepared only for Hispanic migrants. We did not prepare for the other ethnic groups that are coming. We have a huge wave of Turkish. We have a huge wave of Georgians. We have a huge wave of Afghani migrants that arrived. And there's no real support for them. I'll give you an example. The HERC system is phenomenal. When we went to the HERC system for one of the families from Afghanistan who fled because his family was gonna be killed by the Taliban, we went there, everything was in English and Spanish, all the directions, all the medical, and he didn't know what to do. So we brought in a translator to literally walk him around the place and just show him. He didn't know he can get free lotion. He didn't know he can get milk for the baby because again, everything was in English and Spanish. Our Haitian brothers and sisters, same thing. When they get into the HERC system or the DHS system, everything is in English or Spanish and there's no services provided. These languages are indigenous to us, but as an African, they're common to me. So Pular, Wolof, Tigrini. There are so many ethnic groups that are not being paid attention. Example, all the OSHA classes are in Spanish or English. So all the Black migrants that speak other languages don't get access to this. All the Turkish migrants don't get access to those services. And I'm currently talking to Shayna from Rap for the Bronx, who's looking for funding to get the money for Black migrants. I'm currently also looking into doing a class myself so I can give access and a chance for Black migrants to be able to work at construction sites because they cannot work at construction sites unless they have that OSHA card. There are a lot of programs that are just catered to them. We need to figure out how to include these migrants because they're not a minority, they are a majority and there's nowhere for them to go. Even for legal services, here at Port Authority, we provide legal services and we have interns that come and triage them. And one of the things that they tell us is that what they notice with the Black migrants is that there's this disconnect in understanding their rights and the resources that are provided to them. Even when it comes to clothing, a lot of the clothing are catered to mostly shorter Hispanics and not larger Black males or larger women. So they're having a hard time just finding bras that are their size, pants that are their size. So we're trying to fill in the gaps by asking funders around the city, around the country to fund us as we do this. A lot of our funding comes from partners, comes from foundation. They even come from places like Abisa, who's a nonprofit, and DocuBlack, who's willing to fund us. But we're picking up the pieces that are missing. And I urge everyone in this call today, let's figure out how we can support the forgotten migrants. Mental health. Mental health is a very big thing, but I think it's the migrants that are coming, they know what a priest, they know what an imam is, and they know what a rabbi is. And maybe we need to have those people on the ground with mental health services, providing that with them. I'll give you a great example. When a Turkey earthquake happened, we had Turkish migrants that were here. They were crying and expressing their fears. I don't know Turkish. With Google Translate, we were trying to figure out how their family was doing and how to reach out to family members. There was another Turkish young man who is gay. He was afraid to tell me that he was gay because the people who were persecuting him in Turkey looked like me and followed the faith that I was. He came to Port Authority and pulled me aside and said, I really need to talk to you. And in Google Translate, he's like, I hope you don't get upset with me. I'm watching this young man tremble as he texts and as he changes colors to tell me that he's gay and that he needs services. I told him, in America, you're safe here and you're safe with me. We were able to connect them with our partners. Another case we have is a lot of Iranis. We have amazing Irani activists that were activists in their country are now here in the United States. One of the young women that we're closely working with, she's actually Jewish, Irani Jewish. And she was afraid to tell me for a long time that she was Jewish because, again, in her country, the people who were persecuted were people that looked like me and followed my faith. So when our volunteer told her that they were Jewish, she opened up and said, you don't hate me for telling I'm Jewish? I said, of course not. If anything, you should take a bullhorn and yell it around. But we're teaching them their rights and we're helping the forgotten migrants get a space and a voice. So every space that I can get, I'm trying to elevate their stories and where they're coming from so that we can include them in the conversation. Even when it comes to meals, the culturally sensitive meals, all the meals are catered to Hispanic migrants. The African migrants, they're dying for fufu. We actually have an iftar tonight and we're gonna have African dishes for them. So we have been, covering the missing gaps, even with culturally sensitive food. Childcare has been a big challenge because they haven't been able to access a lot of the resources that are provided to them. So here at Port Authority, what we do is we use high school students, we use college students to come meet them at Port Authority and actually take them to their appointments. A lot of our volunteers don't speak the languages that they speak, but they have Google Translate and they're passionate at heart and can advocate for them. So we've had the Tigrini, Eritreans, they speak Amharic and Tigrini. We had a volunteer take them to get public assistance and to apply for Medicaid. But if she wasn't there, they would have been turned away again, like they have been several times. And Black migrants are very scared to speak up because they know what it is like to be discriminated. These are migrants that traveled 11 countries, and all 11 countries, they have been robbed, they have been mistreated, they have gone through everything. So when they see people like us that are welcoming them and supporting them, they welcome it. I have 2 Haitian couples that came yesterday that are in a DHS shelter, don't know what's going on. They have no idea that they can get food. They have no idea that they can get Metro cards. So we're asking our volunteers to step in. But the reality of it is we don't want to do this work alone. We don't want to get burnt out either. So we want more partners, more people to support us on the ground. I know here at Port Authority, they're about to shut down at the end of May, but we will continue to support the migrants where they are. We meet migrants where they are. The biggest misconception is that migrants are coming only to Port Authority. They are not. They're coming through all ports of entry. Our team is on Chinatown welcoming migrants. We're at Mega Bus. If I told you guys how many bus terminals New York City has, you would not believe me. But we're literally meeting them where they're at. So if you have any questions, I'll definitely answer. But one of the things I do want to touch on, only Black migrants are getting ankle bracelets. In order for them to get those ankle bracelet released, they must have a phone. So we are looking for legal representations for those Black migrants that are getting ankle bracelet. Because in New York State, they're not ankle bracelet companies are not allowed to operate. So in order to get that removed, we literally have to send them to another state sometimes. But if you have the great, a powerful organization or powerful legal team to support them, it's possible. But we'll continue to be on the ground. We'll continue to welcome migrants. I know right now we're dealing with the migrants that are being ticketed to Plattsburgh that are returning back. A lot of the migrants that have been sent to other states are returning back, and we are placing them in shelter. Another issue that we have is the LGBTQ+ community. They are being discriminated really badly in the shelter system. They're not getting the support that they need. I have 4 LGBT couples in the Port Authority right now that were rejected at shelter because they cannot prove that they're a couple. It is impossible for these migrants to prove or have the documentations that are required here because everything is taken from them at the border. They literally walk around with a packet with their name and information, and that is it. So it's hard to identify who they are, and our requirements are so strict. So we have to modify our rules and policies to fit this population. And then we also have to educate ourselves about what asylum is. Asylum is a different type of immigration. For the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, these migrants are just going to be sitting ducks and just waiting for support and resources. So we do have to advocate for a work permit. We do have to advocate to expedite them. But at the same time, we also have to provide them with legal services that is currently not happening.
Adama, thank you. Heartbreaking. But thank you for providing us with this information. As you can tell everybody, there's a lot of information that's being provided today. We have one more speaker, and we're going to be taking a few questions from some of you. So we have really 4 or 5 minutes left for this meeting, but we're going to ask people if they can hang on for until 11:15, if possible, to give participants an opportunity to engage. So next, we're going to hear from Alana Tornello. Most of you know Alana very well. She's been involved in disaster preparedness since 2012 with Hurricane Sandy. She served as the coordinator for the Staten Island Long-Term Recovery Organization, organizing cross-borough advocacy in city and national media and operating community food mitigation. She also worked for the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, which is where most of us met her. And currently she is serving as the Director for Resilience for the Human Services Council. So Elena, thank you so much for joining us. If you can quickly go over the information that you have so creatively collected, it would be much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Ayo, and hopefully you all can see my screen. So once again, yeah, my name is Alana Tornello. Some old friends here call me Frank. She, her, I'm Director of Resilience of the Human Services Council. I used to come to many New York City board meetings in the past, but I've been away, so it feels nice to be back with you all and really an honor to speak alongside the amazing leaders who are doing the work. Thank you for inviting me here. I'm going to try to go through this as fast as possible, and then hope that you all will be able to jump into the materials later. So just very quickly, Human Services Council is a membership organization representing 170 nonprofit human service providers in the city, focused mostly on advocacy and coordination between sector and government. We're also an NYC BOAD member. Part of my role is piloting a human services resilience agenda that combines the just pay and procurement and advocacy work that we do for human services organizations that are addressing everyday inequities, and bring that together with how we support our members during cycles of crisis. So those members came to us when they were people seeking asylum to ask for support in uplifting the issues, recommendations, and demands that they felt needed a more unified advocacy voice. And to clarify, our members and us, we don't see people seeking asylum as the crisis. Humans are not a crisis. New York City was already in crisis with long time struggles for partnership and sufficient investment and human services lifelines, which can impede how care is scaled up whenever there are rapid, significant increases in need, as you all know too well. So NYCFO had reached out to learn more about one of the resources for this project, a report called Welcoming Our Newest Neighbors. It was released in January 2023, following engagement with partners that started in November 2022. Included survey submissions, 64 human services programs, convening interviews with over 80 providers and 200 human services workers. And a special thanks to Catholic Charities, New York Immigration Coalition, Hispanic Federation United Way, and Philanthropy New York, who helped us co-host those. And since the report, we've integrated that into public testimonies, letters, meetings with government, philanthropy, and more. And we've been following up on those recommendations and continue engagement with our members and partners to update advocacy priorities as the opportunities arise. So to get into the top 5 themes of the report, first, that a lot of our partners emphasized that they were striving for compassionate, dignified, and community-led services, that those services needed to be coordinated and sustained for the long term, that they see projected months and years long needs. And as Power said, this is about when the cameras leave, but the needs remain and become more complex, and we need to extend those resources. Second, many organizations saw this work as a natural extension of their everyday missions and services. Third, many ended up offering services with their own initiative and funds via their own networks and community hubs and with infrequent funding from government. Fourth, they were able to meet many of the rapid needs, as you just heard from these amazing leaders, but require significant funding to sustain that work moving forward. And we know this reflects the systemic inequities in resource distribution in New York City, with long-term underinvestment and delayed pay to community organizations. Last, partners reported that there were still serious gaps and needs in both immediate and long-term care coordination, legal services, employment support, temporary housing, healthcare, especially mental health, accessibility, and more, many of which you heard already. So I know it's time for many of those that have to jump off. That's your top 5 themes, and I'm going to go into them into more detail, and you can look at the PowerPoint and the report to learn more. For those that can stay, I'm going to jump into this a little bit more. I'm sorry, Aisle, for the screen. Some of the text is small, and I know I sometimes do this. My apologies. I couldn't figure out how to make this graph bigger. So, so these are some of the data that backs up what I just said. By the way, this slide and the next slide have graphs. I will be referring to only some info in them, but they you can dive in the what I'll be sending, and there is alternate text for these slides for those of you that might use a screen reader like myself. So providers offered a wide array of critical, acute, and long-term services. Among the 14 types of services you see here, the most common were client services coordination, food services, employment, education support, and health. Interestingly, a relatively small number had the resources to offer legal services, about 12%, but the need for more legal services came up basically in every conversation, as Beatriz and Adama mentioned. 29% reported working with government service hubs. Most, though, reported working with hubs that have intentionally or organically formed around local nonprofits, houses of worship, shelters, and businesses or mutual aid efforts. And 82% ensured that services were accessible through language translation and interpretation, although they listed those languages, and as Adama also mentioned, are still trying to expand to more languages and do have gaps. Though only 13% affirmed accessibility for people with disabilities. And of these services, less than 20% had received any funding to expand their accessibility. Next, we have that 96% of the folks we spoke to said that they were providing the support entirely or partially out of pocket, trying to extend existing resources. 40% reported that a government entity asked them to provide those services, mostly city agencies and mayoral offices. But less than 13% reported that they had complete governmental funding in those partnerships, which means organizations, and mostly those were reimbursement, which means they were still fronting costs. So this is a summary of I'm not going to go through all the recommendations on the screen, but basically providers offered a lot of issues and possible solutions. And there are examples that I've listed here that are both cross-cutting and then specific to different service areas. So for example, 2 cross-cutting ones were to have the city create an expedited funding stream that's for holistic human services that's designed with community organizations. Another was a public campaign to counter stigma and discrimination and really explain what's happening so that more people get to hear what we heard today from the voices of leaders that are doing this work and understand what is actually happening in the city. We split the recommendations into the types, as mentioned. An example for client services coordination was expanding navigation centers or funding stronger people-centered data management infrastructure across program that still really is focused on protecting client confidentiality. In employment, it included demanding expediting of the employment authorization document process, the New York City Licensing Act, and more funding for workforce development training, worker collectives, and supportive childcare. Health included funding community networks of culturally and linguistically appropriate mental health providers. I would say this one came up probably just as often as legal services needs. And supporting advocacy for healthcare for all, regardless of immigration status, which some of you will see in the news right now in the fight around the state budget. Housing included expedited shelter, public housing, and rental assistance programs, and expedited funds for community partners to offer more sustainable housing options, especially with stabilization beds, as Peter discussed. Legal included significantly expanding funding for emergency triage legal needs, but also really a need for multi-year legal representation. And youth included more mentor programs to provide guardians for unaccompanied migrating youth. And this is an ever evolving list. We continue to meet with members and partners to update these, and there's probably a lot missing that you all are going to want to share with me, and I would love to hear them, and I'll put my information again in the chat. So the main takeaway is we've been urging the city to invest in long-term community-driven care coordination across these services. We're calling for more direct multi-year investments in an exhausted human services infrastructure. We're encouraged by some announcements, such as the Welcome NYC campaign or the mayor creating a new office, but we'll see what those do for this effort. The advocacy needs to continue in order to continue to get these resources sustained for the long road ahead. And basically that the city prides itself as a sanctuary, but it also struggles sometimes, often, to equitably share resources with community leaders and providers who really make that sanctuary possible. So thank you, and please take a look at the report and written testimonies for more info. Really, thank you again, Io and Racine, for including us today.
Alana, thank you so much. This has been an incredible meeting with so much information. We're going to take a few questions. Racine is providing tech from City Harvest, one of our board members today. Thank you, Racine. And I can't see whether or not anybody's hands are raised, but if you can call on that person to help, that would be great. Is there anybody with that? You know what? Just speak out and we'll hear you. But I do have a question. My question is about schools. Does anybody know how they are processing children to get into schools? I had a friend who heads a charter school in the Bronx call me a couple of weeks ago to tell me that she had a space available and wanted to welcome asylum seekers. And so I reached out to Moya. I got a response back from Moya that they are not putting asylum seekers into charter schools. And then all of a sudden, this was a few weeks ago, and then all of a sudden last week, I contacted that person about something else, and they were on a Zoom with people from the Department of Education wanting to find out where they could enroll children in charter schools. So wondering if any of you have any information about how the children are doing in these schools.
I can answer from Port Authority perspective. So here on the ground, we are enrolling people, and we are enrolling them in the charter school system. Not us specifically, we have partners and teams that do that. But again, the challenges have been like the language access. So when they enroll in them, the documentation, the medical part, we actually partnered with Morris Heights. So they come and pick up get their medical. And then we enroll them in the closest location. But around the Hertz, which is in Manhattan, all the schools are at capacity. Some of the schools are providing transportation to and from the site, but the reality of it is, there's a lot of schools need to be filled, but the transportation part is also an issue and it's a challenge. How we'd address that, I'll leave that to the DOE advocates, but that has been a challenge.
Thank you, Adama. Are there any other questions? I see a hand raised. Is that Shayna? And then Charmaine, from what I can see. So Shayna, go ahead, please.
Hi, all. First and foremost, thank you, everybody that shared today and just coming together and for the continued work. I did have a quick question about the faith-based, the congregations, and if that survey can be shared. I have a couple of congregations in mind that may be a good fit. If Peter and team are still looking for additional congregations to engage with.
Yeah, I shared the link to the survey in the chat.
And we will also forward it to everyone who attended this.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
All right, and then I see the hand up for Charmaine.
Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning. Thank you all for sharing that. My question is, I get so many questions about different aspects of what's going on, and I don't always know how to get the information. Is there any place where all of you are listed and what you do is listed that I could send people to quickly?
That's a big one. It is doubtful that all of the organizations that are providing services are listed somewhere, but the one place I can think of is possibly Moya. So we can check in with Moya to see if they have such a list. Does anyone have any other recommendation?
We put together a brief list in the very beginning that I'm sure needs to be updated, but I have some basic contact info. It's myself, it's Adama, it's some other individuals. So I'll just check with everybody to make sure we have the most up-to-date info, and then I'm happy to share that along, AO, for you to share with the larger group.
Perfect. Perfect. Are there any other questions? Let's see if we have any other hands raised. I don't see any. So I'm sorry, speak out.
No, I was gonna say there's no questions in the chat as well.
Okay, perfect. So we will send the links to everybody from this meeting. And I just want to end with thank you, Julianne and Shayna, for helping to put this meeting together, and Racine for providing the tech. So Beatriz, I guess I want to say, when I think about her presentation, I just think about longevity of the organization and the work that they have done so well over the years. And power, I mean, there's really no other word, but power. That's what I think about, the power of, his individual persistence to help others in his and other communities. Peter, faith. He talked about, all of the churches and what they can provide, and Adama talked about the fact that the one thing that people recognize when they go to another country is, a religious figure, a religious entity. So that is a big part of the healing that needs to be included with asylum seekers and immigrants coming to this country. And then Alana is just always filled with so much data and information. We can rely on her to provide that. And what she did provide today, we will send the report to everyone, really seems like something that people can use and include in their request for funding, because here's the data, here are the facts, here's the information. And I'm leaving someone out. Adama, I mean, is there another word other than, well, it's not even one word, just fierce and resilience. Those are the two words that I can think of. The stories, the information that we received is definitely invaluable, and the stories are heartbreaking. So thank you to everyone who attended this meeting today. Next meeting in May, we're going to talk about some of what was talked about here today, but the tremendous lack of equity in disaster response. Hope that you will all enjoy us, and Zach will be back with us at that time. So everyone, thank you for staying over time, and have a great day. Thank you to all of our presenters.